Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are staring at a stack of documents that, I'll be honest, at first glance look like the absolute driest reading material you could possibly find.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking error logs, translation tables, tax code guides.
For ERP systems, no less, osFinancials and TurboCASH, it sounds incredibly niche.
It does. It sounds like something you'd read to fall asleep.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Once you actually start reading through these audit logs, you realize this isn't really about software code at all.
No, not really.
It's about how you take a rigid, cold digital logic that was probably built in English and, well, force it to survive in the wild, chaotic reality of the Croatian economy.
That is the perfect way to frame it. Most people think localization is just, you run a script.
Right. Swap save for the Croatian word for save, print for print, and you're done.
And then you go to lunch.
Yeah.
But the documents we're looking at, specifically for the HR locale, they show localization is actually a high-stakes negotiation.
Yeah.
You're juggling legal compliance, programming, and what I call cultural psychology.
And the stakes are surprisingly high. We're not just talking about a typo in a menu.
Not even close.
We're talking about errors that can crash a whole database or accidentally insult the user or, and this is my favorite, imply that an accountant is renting a luxury yacht.
Instead of just looking at a pie chart, we will definitely get to the yachts. That's a classic moment.
But before we get to the fun stuff, we have to start where every business in Croatia starts.
The tax man.
Right, the PDV. The documents reference this constantly. It seems like the entire software architecture just hinges on getting this one thing right.
It does. PDV stands for Porez na dodanu vrednost. It's their VAT, or value-added tax.
Okay.
Now, if you're a developer somewhere in the U.S. or the U.K., you might just program a single field, call it tax rate, and move on.
Sure, set it to a percentage.
But looking at these localization guidelines, that approach would make the software completely illegal in Croatia instantly.
Because it's not a flat tax. It's not just pay 10% on everything.
Far from it. The source material highlights this really rigid, multi-tiered structure that the software has to hardcode. You have the opa-stopa.
The standard rate.
That's the standard rate set at 25%. That's for most goods. But then the logic tree has to branch out a lot.
And I saw these breakdowns.
You need a reduced rate of 13% for things like newspapers, electricity, water. And then there's an even lower rate, the niža-stopa, at 5%.
And that's for the absolute essentials.
The absolute essentials. We're talking bread, milk, medicine.
So the localization team isn't just translating the word tax.
Not at all.
They're essentially embedding the country's socioeconomic priorities right into the code. The software has to be smart enough to know that a loaf of bread is legally distinct from a laptop.
Exactly. And if you get that mapping wrong, the business owner isn't just annoyed. They could be liable for tax fraud.
Wow.
It gets even messier with identity numbers. In the English-speaking world, we're pretty used to a single tax ID for a business. But the logs talk about this massive headache with the Matici Brai versus the OIB.
The OIB is the modern one, right? Personal ID number.
It is. Osobny identifikacijski broj. It's the current legal standard. But here's the catch that drove the developers crazy.
What's that?
Even though the OIB is the only number that legally matters now, the guidelines explicitly forbade them from deleting the field for the old Matični broj.
Why? Why keep a dead ID number in the system? That feels like digital hoarding.
It's because of time. Accounting software doesn't just live in the present. It contains decades of history. If you just wipe that old ID field,
You orphan all the old records.
they effectively orphan 10 years of customer records filed under that old system. They just, poof, float away with no legal identifier.
That makes perfect sense. You can't just burn the archives. So good localization is actually about data preservation. You have to keep a foot in the past so the historical reports don't break.
Precisely. And speaking of details, there was a fascinating note in the currency files. It wasn't about math. It was about grammar.
Oh, I saw this. The cent versus cents debate.
In English, it's so simple. 1 cent, 2 cents, yet an S. The code can just have a simple rule.
If it's more than one, add S.
But Croatian grammar is much more complex with pluralization. The way you handle the numbers 2, 3, and 4 is different from how you handle 5 through 20.
So a simple add S rule doesn't just look wrong, it looks illiterate.
It looks cheap. It breaks the immersion. If the report has the wrong grammar, it just feels like it was made by a robot. These little details, they build trust.
Trust is a really good segue to the charter incident. This was my absolute favorite part of the audit logs.
Oh, yeah.
Because it shows how dangerous a direct literal translation can be.
This is a classic false friend scenario. So in the original English source code, there's a plugin called Charter.
Okay, so in business software, that says to me, charts, graphs, pie charts, bar charts, visualizing data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the translator saw the word charter, and their brain went immediately to the Adriatic code.
Oh, no.
In Croatia, the word charter is almost exclusively used to talk about renting boats. The nautical tourism industry. It's a huge part of the economy.
So the first translation suggested the software had a built-in yacht booking feature.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Imagine you're an accountant, you're opening the general ledger, trying to balance the books, and you see a button that says, click here to rent a sailboat.
I mean, I would love that button, but probably not during tax season, so how did they fix it?
They had to abandon the word completely. They changed it to graphiconi, which literally means charts, or is graphiconima, reports with charts.
A perfect example of how cultural context can just completely hijack technical meaning.
It really is. You end up selling a vacation instead of a spreadsheet.
Now, there was another term that caused a huge debate, but the resolution was the total opposite. They decided not to be precise. The Premnica.
The delivery note. Yes, this was a battle between, let's call it, purity and simplicity.
Because usually in accounting, you distinguish between goods coming in and goods going out. You'd expect different terms.
A linguistic purist would demand that. They would want separate words for the creditor side and the debtor side. But the logs show they decided to use ad premnica for both.
Why? Why blur the lines like that?
Because ad premnica functionally describes the movement of goods. And the localization team decided that for the actual user, the person on the loading dock, the warehouse manager, it doesn't matter if the box is leaving or arriving.
The physical document in their hand is an ad premnica.
It is. They realized that forcing a technical distinction would just confuse the daily user.
That's a really smart insight. Sometimes clarity beats accuracy. If the user hesitates, the software has failed.
Exactly. It's about user flow. You don't want the language to be a speed bump.
Okay, let's move to the part of the code that the document's labeled the do not touch zone. This is where we go from the user interface to the back-end database.
And this is where localization gets genuinely dangerous. If you translate the wrong thing here, you don't just confuse the user, you break the machine.
So the audit highlights a plugin called Handy Tools, which is for database maintenance.
Right, it talks directly to the SQL tables.
And the rule is, never translate the table names.
Never. The source code references tables like transact, batcon, or sysvars. These aren't just words, they're addresses.
Like a street address.
Exactly. If you live at Main Street, and I translate that on the envelope to Glavna Ulica, the postman, in this case the SQL server, has no idea where to deliver the data.
So if a translator gets a little too enthusiastic and translates sysvars into correct Croatian, the whole software just crashes.
Instantly, the database mapping fails. The software looks for a table that simply doesn't exist. So the solution they came up with is to use wrapper text.
What does that mean?
Well, the Croatian interface will say something like Recitaraj sysvars. It keeps the English address, but it wraps it in Croatian instructions. It tells the user, you're performing this action on this specific thing called sysvars.
So you know where the language stops and the code begins.
It's the only way to protect the technical integrity.
Speaking of code leaking into the text, what's the deal with these percent symbols? The experts called it invisible code.
Those are placeholders. In programming, you can't hard-code dynamic info. If an error message needs to say error in invoice 505, the 505 changes every time. So the code just says error in invoice percents.
Okay, so the translator sees percents in the text file. What are they supposed to do?
Treat it like a radioactive isotope. Don't change it, don't delete it, don't translate it. But, and this is the tricky part, you must move it.
Move it.
You have to place it where it grammatically belongs in the Croatian sentence. If the Croatian sentence structure puts the number at the end, that percent has to slide to the end.
And if you delete it by mistake?
The variable just vanishes. And there was a critical failure flagged in the audit with a tag called @appname @mam.
Right, what happened there?
That tag was supposed to pull in the software's name for the login prompt. Please log into software name.
And the translator deleted it.
Accidentally deleted the tag.
Yeah.
So the login screen just said, please log into, and then silence. Big blank space.
The software name just disappeared.
Poof. Gone. It makes the whole application look broken before the user even types their password. It shows translators are basically editing code logic.
Which brings us to what the logs call the art of politeness, because the Croatian localization is incredibly real.
Nice. It is. The source mentions the Malimo effect.
Malimo, meaning please.
Yes. In English, especially American software, we're used to blunt force. Invalid entry, file not found.
Access denied. Very cold.
Very cold. The standard for the Croatian interface is to soften that blow. So the error becomes item out of stock. Malimo, review your entry.
It's almost apologizing for the user's mistake.
It's about the brand voice. They want the software to feel like a helpful assistant, not a strict taskmaster. But this politeness has a cost.
Pixels. Screen space.
Exactly. Malimo takes up 6 characters plus a space. There was a serious debate about using the abbreviation MOL to save room.
And they rejected it.
Flat out. The expert note says to avoid it. They decided that MOL looks like a typo or just lazy. They prioritized manners over pixel efficiency.
But they couldn't always prioritize length. The backup button was a disaster waiting to happen.
Oh, the text expansion problem. This is
Yes.
just physics. Backup is 6 letters. The literal Croatian translation, Sigrondos na kopija, is 17 letters.
That's nearly 3 times the length. It would just break the whole UI.
You'd overlap with other buttons. It would look awful. So they had to pivot. They couldn't use the literal translation. They changed the term to archiva,
Archive.
which means archive. It cut the character count by 40%.
But does archive mean the same thing as backup to an accountant?
It's close enough. It conveys saving this for later or putting this in a safe place without destroying the interface. It's a great example of where localization is really an editing job. You have to fit the meaning into the docs, literally.
Let's get into some of the really specific vocabulary, especially in inventory and banking. The distinction between stock and item seemed trivial to me at first.
It is not trivial to the database. In English conversation, we use them interchangeably. Check the stock, check the item.
Sure.
But the audit makes a really strict distinction between Zalia and article.
What's the functional difference then?
Zalia, or stock, is used when the user is searching the entire inventory registry, all warehouses, all levels, the whole system. Article, or item, is for looking up a specific name or description.
So if you label the button wrong,
You mislead the user about the scope of their search. If the button says search items, but it's actually doing a deep system-wide stock search, the user gets results they don't understand and can't use.
the language has to map perfectly to the database query.
It has to.
The other legal minefield was the statement showdown, ISVOD versus ISVADAC. This one felt like I was reading a legal brief.
This is a high-value insight for anyone doing business there. In English, we just say bank statement. But the Croatian sources distinguish based on the direction of the document.
Correct.
Yes. ISVADAC is external. It's the paper you get from the bank. ISVOD is internal. It's the report the system generates.
Why does that distinction matter so much?
Because of the ISVOD otvoreni stavki, the debtor statement. In Croatia, this isn't just a polite reminder. It's a document with legal weight.
Okay.
At year-end, Company A sends it to Company B and says, "This is what our books say you owe us. Confirm or deny." It's a formal ledger confirmation.
So if the translation is wishy-washy, it undermines the whole legal process.
Exactly. You can't call it a list of debts. It has to be the specific term ISVOD to carry that authority.
I want to wrap up with a few vocabulary choices that I think reveal the psychology of business. First up, back orders,
A fascinating shift. The literal translation would be zaostel narjibi.
which implies
Zaostel implies lagging or something left behind. It has a negative connotation, like neglected orders. It feels like a failure.
and the software avoids that.
Yes, they use naknadna isporuka, which translates to subsequent delivery.
That sounds much more optimistic.
It's a promise. It tells the customer, we don't have it now, but it's coming. It reframes the situation from a shortage to a future fulfillment. It's just good customer relations.
Then there's the acronym BOM, BOM, Bill of Materials.
Translated as sestavnica.
And the expert note here was wild. It detailed how this one word has to cover 3 completely different industries.
Just doing some heavy lifting. In a factory, sestavnica is the list of raw materials: steel, screws, plastic.
Sure, makes sense.
But the software also uses that same structure for sales kits, like a Christmas gift basket. That's a prodashna sestavnica. And then there's the third one,
Hospitality.
recipes. If you're running a restaurant on this software, the ingredients for a tomato soup are tracked using the bill of materials logic. That's called a normative in the industry, but the interface uses sestavnica.
So that one word had to be broad enough to cover steel beams, gift baskets, and tomato soup.
A very versatile word.
Finally, something we use every single day. Email. Or is it ipucha?
The audit was strict on this. If you walk into a cafe in Zagreb, Everyone says, send me an email. It's the colloquial standard.
But the interface most use IPOTA.
It must.
Why force the formal term if everyone uses the slang?
Professional credibility. Using email or other anglicisms makes the software feel temporary, like a cheap port. Using IPOTA signals that this is a serious native business tool. It's the difference between wearing sweatpants or a suit to a meeting.
Even if sweatpants are more comfortable, you wear the suit because it commands respect.
Exactly.
So, stepping back from all of this, what's the big picture? We've talked tax codes, yacht rentals, politeness, broken login screens.
I think the big takeaway is that localization is really about safety.
Safety.
When an accountant logs into this software, they need to feel safe. They need to know the tax code is legally defensible so they don't get fined. They need to see Molimo so they feel respected. And they need to know that clicking save won't crash the database because of a bad translation.
Good localization makes the complex machinery invisible.
It makes it invisible so the user can just do their job. It turns the software from a foreign object into a local tool.
It really makes you think about all this invisible infrastructure. We talked about how that one missing placeholder, the APPNAM at tag, made the software name vanish.
Just a ghost in the machine, a tiny string of characters.
It makes you wonder, in the apps we use every day, our banking, our GPS, our medical records, how many other invisible translation decisions are holding everything together? And if one of those people had chosen yacht instead of chart, where would we be?
Probably at the marina, wondering where our tax returns went.
Exactly. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.